Ali, and maybe we're being live streamed. Okay. The whitewashing of Ali, but we were wondering about, just in terms of media and images, when you introduce yourself, if you could say what your first exposure.
We're being live streamed. Okay.
Doing...
Sorry.
You can go. You're good.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. So yeah, your first exposure. What was the first image or media kind of encounter you had with Muhammad Ali that affected you? You know, that got a reaction from you. And you know, we can go on later on to talk about if that reaction is cultivated or if it's just, you know, what it was.
Excellent. Yeah. And then I'm going to tweet everyone the link. So be ready for that. But we are live stream right now.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, just beware.
All right. Well, live streamers, if you're joining us, I'm Julie Kedzie, and Professor Nancy Kidder is working on some technical issues right now. But this is the first of, we hope, many not formal panels. We'll be having those with fight writing too, but this is one of our epilogues. And the origin of this came from the discussions Nancy and I would have after teaching her fight writing class. Because we would just end up talking to each other via Zoom for about an hour after class. And we're like, we should really invite some more people to this, not make it as formal as a panel, because of course we want all your insight in a formal way, but let you relax a little bit. It's a Friday night. Of course, nobody has anything to do on Friday nights ever. So it's a really good way of us to just jump in there and take up your time by making you talk about combat.
Okay, so I hope I tagged everyone. Is everyone there?
I have no idea.
I'm coming back.
I forgot the full list. I forgot.
I'll see.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there's Josh. And there's Josh.
Okay.
Right there. Excellent. We've got Chris, Rennie. We've got Jillian. And is it DeCourcy?
Yeah, you actually got it right.
Right. And you know what? I should put myself on, right?
Well.
I'm delaying. There we go. There we go. And up there is my husband, new to this world of writing and fighting, at least on camera. Julie knows he held the camera for our live stream in Vegas for UFC 264. And I think that the phone melted in your hand.
The video was better than the audio, but.
Okay. It's about the process of being there. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is the epilogue. This is episode 1 for class number 1 or hangout number 1. And Julie did a great job of explaining why this came about and why, you know, hopefully you guys maybe have Ted Lasso, or you may actually have plans and you guys are social. But sometimes Julie and I just like to geek out, and how great is it to talk about, you know, our peers to talk about the content that we're so excited about. So I'm going to have everyone go around, catch us up with your lives. We haven't seen you. Some of you guys haven't been to the Writing and Fighting virtual classroom for over a year or so. And I know some people are doing off with pursuits. I'm thinking of Brian, literally flying in new directions. So Julie, maybe you could start us off, catching us up, and then quickly to kind of bring us into this conversation. There are such evocative imagery that Netflix's Blood Brothers, and we're going to discuss more of it, which is a new documentary about Malcolm X and his relationship with Muhammad Ali. And maybe you could offer something that when you think about Muhammad Ali, I think about two of them that are brought up is the Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali fight, the rematch. And that's that kind of, we just looked at it today, Julie, and what he's showing there, as well as the image of him in the 1996 Olympics with lighting the Olympic torch. But if you could share something that means something to you or something that you think about, that'd be
sure. Okay, I'm Julie Kedzie. I'm co-teaching fight writing with Nancy at American University, although I am the virtual ghost in that classroom who often flickers away because I don't use technology well. Anyway, I would say that my first live media, I guess, yeah, it was live media exposure to Muhammad Ali was at the 96 Olympics. I was not there live, but I saw when he lit the torch, and it was a bizarre time for me. I just started point karate, and I was actually at a new coach's house. I'd left my parents, and I was living with him and his family for that summer. And I was so lonely and so isolated and didn't know what was going on. I was about 14 or 15 years old. I can't remember. I should do the math, but we'll keep moving. Anyway, I saw him lighting the torch, and I was a teenager and also emotionally fragile. And I was there to learn about combat, even though it was point karate, and not MMA or boxing. And it made me cry. And, in watching this documentary and watching the critique kind of that scene or that presentation of Ali to America, and given, the struggles and given the relationship that he had with his Black Muslim identity in America and the struggles there, I just found it really fascinating. Like, this documentary really kind of hit a nerve with me watching that and bringing that memory back. I would also say that my favorite picture of Ali is actually the smiling one, where he's playing that huge joke and his face is just completely lit up, because I don't think you didn't see the person in the 96 Olympics. I mean, it was very evocative, but in that picture where he's just smiling and goofing around, you just see you see the person you would have wanted to be in the gym with, the person who's going to work hard and inspire you, but also make you laugh. And it's a really important member of the gym, and also, world-class athlete. So moving along.
Thank you so much. I like all of those things. And I'm having memories of when I first saw those. Chris, you are next. Please catch us up and share your thoughts.
Well, it's been about a year, and I live in Jackson Heights. So I was in the epicenter. So where I live, my whole neighborhood was pretty traumatized right away. So it's been a weird kind of like a return to like acting kind of like normal, but a lot of people here still don't do regular stuff. I don't go to people's houses still. There's only 1 or 2 families that'll come inside mine. So that's a little weird still always a little strange here. My kids just went to school for the first time this week, but I put out 2 books since the pandemic started, and I've been hauling ass, and I started a Twitch channel. I chased off a bear last month, and that was exciting. But as for like, you want to know like a little bit of my exposure to Muhammad Ali?
Yeah.
So I was a kid. I'm 42. So he was kind of a ubiquitous figure that was spoken of because I was a little kid during Mike Tyson's heyday. So he was somebody you always kind of knew about. And then in my early 20s, I worked side by side with this Vietnam vet who just told me stories about his whole life. And his father was a boxer, and he kind of like was one of these guys who like kind of set the neighborhood kids straight, built a boxing ring in his garage, and kind of helped kids settle their differences and stuff. And so my boss had boxed from a young age, and the stories that he told me about Muhammad Ali were much more insightful, because my boss was like a staunch Catholic, and he definitely grew up kind of very skeptical of Muhammad Ali. And then when he watched him, his big thing was when he interacted with children, I think that made him understand that this was a good person regardless of their differences. And I always think about like that, about like, what I process through media is obviously through a very particular lens. And it was really cool to hear it from somebody who was experiencing it at that time as a person who's like, an Irish Catholic guy who's like, all right, who the hell is this? Why isn't your name Cassius anymore? And then to see somebody who's talking to me about it, having fully processed it and fully accepted him as for the person that he was, and as a good person at his core. So that's a really profound, lesson in Muhammad Ali I got about 20 some odd years ago.
Thank you, Chris. And I love that how we learn through other people's lens of sharing how evocative that is. So thank you. Can't wait to remark. Both Julie and I could not locate our books because I tried to get everyone's book, but I could describe it. It's really cool. And there's pictures. Josh, if you have yours around or someone, like, please. But thank you. Oh, Josh is going to go get it. Great. How about we go to Brian? Brian.
Hey.
Catch us up.
Hey, I'm just so glad the pandemic's over, guys. This is just.
I know. Aren't you glad that everything is, we can take the masks off.
We're back to normal in our little Zoom bubble. No, but it's good to see everybody. I guess as far as what I've been doing, you said it. I mean, I'm doing this. Like I'm just learning how to fly an airplane and not die, and because it's really the margin is thin. So yeah, it's been a really incredible thing. I mean, basically in the dark of winter last winter, it was, you guys don't know, you were there. We were all there together. But I had so my father passed away. He was a pilot in his whole life. He passed away in 2007. And one of the last things that was given to me was his old flight bag. My brother said, I feel like you're the person that should have this. And it was like the last thing. I hadn't done an archaeological sort of dig through of his stuff. I had just kept it in a cabinet for a long time. Last winter, I just decided to open it up, and there's all the pens and the highlighters and the books and just all the tools and all the, old stuff. And I was like, I got to do this. So I started researching it, and I was like, you know what? Like, there's never a good time to spend a ridiculous amount of money and energy on something. So you might as well just do it. Anyway, so I signed up, I got my medical done as soon as I was 2 weeks clear of my vaccine, second shot. I mean, I was right there, my doctor appointment to get my FAA medical was the first time I'd been in a building since, we were pretty strict over here. But anyway, immediately started flight training. So April 22nd, I started, and I have done about almost 70 hours, and I've done all my requirements, and I'm about 6 hours away from what's called a check ride, which is sort of the final gauntlet you have to sort of go through. So I'm studying 12 hours a day and generally panicking. So I'm enjoying myself. I'm right. I'm comfortable. So.
Are you going solo?
Yeah, I've already done all that. Yeah. I did. My first solo, by the way, was on Father's Day. So that was a really neat,
that's
a neat thing.
Yeah.
Granted, it's been a bummer. I've been wanting to call him, to like ask questions, and he just doesn't answer. So, but anyway, so that's what I've been doing. And then as far as, the film and just Ali in general, I mean, I guess high level, I have kind of, when I saw the documentary, it just sort of was like another unfolding of a sort of, first of all, I'm really glad to see documentaries that really just focus on particular angles and stories, as opposed to just like, here's the story of Muhammad Ali, or here's the story of, because they always get very abbreviated. So just this being so focused was really cool. But it reminded me, I grew up in the 70s, and he was just an icon. He was a superhero. He was mythical. He was one of the first really, truly mythical people that I even knew existed. So I've really spent most of my life kind of unpacking and sorting out in a more realistic way, what are all the conflicts, what are all the situations, the fights with, orthodoxy and culture and, all of that. So it was really another level when I saw this documentary about, this is another sort of degree of resolution that I'm sort of retroactively getting about Muhammad Ali, because I'm not, I haven't taken your class, so I'm not as studious as I should be ahead of time. But seeing this, it was really enlightening. It was really cool. And I'll get into it maybe if it comes back around to me. But I just wanted to mention that for whatever strange reason, and I'll just put it out there, this whole story really reminded me, and I don't know how familiar you are with Martin Buber. But it really reminded me of the cause of secular Judaism and the Haskalah movement of the 50s, where people were really feeling limited by semiotics and language, and really trying to accept and embrace and kind of coalesce orthodoxy with retribution and all these other features that were issues at that time. And Martin Buber, through his sort of his famous, I thou principle, I, it, I, thou, treating people as these sacred interactions. And, when he was asked about sort of, what we do with people that, were Nazis or whatever, that killed a lot of people, you know, it's sort of like death's not even good enough. Like we don't have a punishment good enough for them, so just kind of let it be. Like he was sort of transcendental and you know, but at odds with his own upbringing in terms of orthodoxy and his earlier rabbinical times. So anyway, I know that's like a weird curveball to it, but I don't know why it just really came up to me as being, you know, when you're thinking about the Nation of Islam and its sort of factions and all of that, I just found that to be tremendously interesting. And since it was really happening at about the same time, it just sort of reminded me that, wow, like that time, any sort of new movements were having these kind of problems. And then just these guys, obviously Malcolm X and Ali were just these incredible pillars of that problem. And so I found it fascinating. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Brian. By the way, thank you for bringing all of that to this conversation. If anyone has transcendental philosophy on their bingo card, Brian already got that going. So we've already brought that into the conversation. Thank you so much. And I actually really want to get back to you because I think we have, for me, it also came up to how we view politics and religion and public figures like this now versus at that time in the 60s. All right. So thank you. And Josh Gross, I have the last time you were in Writing and Fighting, I think was back in spring of 2020. So good to see you.
Great to see you. This is awesome. Congratulations on your first show. Is it, what is it? I mean, Kidder Kedzie After Dark. Can we do that?
I like it because, you know, then, you know, it means
that's what I'm saying. Off the table. There you go. I expect nothing less.
Thank you. Catch us up in the life of Josh Gross.
You know, it's obviously we all are going through our own thing. I was laid off from the Athletic, as we know, and following in May, you know, and trying to work on some stuff, doing some stuff with Sherdog here and there, doing a lot of soccer. I'm the beat writer covering the Los Angeles Football Club. It's an MLS team in Los Angeles, so that's fun. For like the newspaper, every newspaper except the LA Times, basically in Southern California. So that's neat. Yeah. It's neat to see your stuff in print and actually touch it and feel it's a different kind of gig. And then, you know, still sort of looking forward. I have book ideas. You know, it's scary once you've done one. It's even scarier, I think, because you know what you went through it and you like did it. You're like, oh my god, I know I have to live with this the rest of my days. So, you know, that sort of thing. But I'm enjoying myself, trying to keep my sanity in whatever ways I could. And I've golfed a lot, which has been great to do again. I haven't played in a lot of years with this. Like a lot of people, I guess the pandemic brought us out on the golf course. Unlike flying, I keep my feet on the ground. I'm comfortable there. So yeah, I'm happy to be talking to you guys.
Oh, thank you. And before you get into, and I should say also, if you have I can't believe I forgot saying this, if you have a Malcolm X moment as well, that rings, you know, and that kind of person. You've also provided a work in the canon of Muhammad Ali with Ali versus Inoki. Everyone should read this. It's. I mean, do you want to describe it, Josh? Because I could.
Please go ahead.
Okay. You know, this fight. You know,
real quick. Whoever has my copy at the University of Iowa, I would really like it back.
There you go.
I forgot who I lent it to, but I never got it back. Okay, keep going.
Julie's so got the number down. But Ali versus Inoki, you know, especially very pivotal, Josh, with the continued kind of these building these fights that are MMA versus boxing, even though they're in the boxing world. I think it's interesting that that's still something that is being put out there, and that's content that obviously there is an audience for that wants to consume it. And, you know, this is likely one of those, the first one with Ali and Inoki that many people completely forget when they are discussing Muhammad Ali. I hope it's in the Ken Burns. What do you think? Will it be? Because obviously this is just, the documentary we're talking about now is like the first course in the September month of Muhammad Ali content, because on Sunday begins the 4-hour documentary that Ken Burns put on PBS. So Josh, I have to ask you now, do you think that this fight will be there?
I don't know. I think Burns is sort of focusing each episode on a period of Ali's life, like a time period. So when that fight happened, it was 1976. Ali was the best known person in the world. He was the most famous person in the world. Like everyone knew Muhammad Ali, and everybody knew the Pope. It was like those two. And so probably I would think that that's a period in Ali's life, very complex. He's going through divorces. He's gone through a lot of money. This is superstar Ali, months after another fight with Joe Frazier and, the Thrill in Manila. So it's like, this is as big as it gets. So I would like to see that. Honestly, I'd like to do my own documentary on it. Quite honestly, it's something I've been trying to do for a while. If anyone out there wants to finance a documentary on Ali versus Inoki, please contact me because we can do that.
The Kickstarter or the GoFundMe.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the bio or the link.
Trying to get a production going is interesting, and it's something that I've been trying to do for a few years. So I would say I'm much more of like a journalist mind, and like, I don't know that I'm the producer type that gets it done. I haven't proven that myself yet, so I can do it. But maybe someone listening to this will do it.
Any filmmakers out there wanting to collaborate?
Look, I think that just speaks to the idea of, like, you talked about September, but honestly, since Ali passed, it's just been content after content, documentary after documentary, book after book, because he lived like such an enormous life. I mean, this is we don't talk about him because he was a great fighter, or he protested the government, or he was Muslim, or it's all of it. It's like Muhammad Ali's life was larger than everything. And I think the thing that I learned about him that really sort of bound everything together and made it sort of why people connected so hard with him, because he connected with them. Like, he had an ability just to be with a person and show genuine interest in that person, just a regular person off the street, and really sort of try to understand who they were and connect like in a human way. And that was his real gift among his many, many, many gifts.
Yeah.
What makes him so compelling and unique, and also, obviously being historically important, being parts of critical movements in the United States of America, being a voice for freedom, for the oppressed, for voices who weren't being elevated in mainstream press. Like, he was able to do all this because of this fame that he earned. And he refused to let that fame define him or put him in a box. And he was just his own person. And I think the connection to Malcolm X showed that they connected in that way, right? They were their own people living their own lives with their own convictions. And they just had massive voices, and they resonated with people because they made sense and they were honest. It felt like they were being genuine. And, that's really, I think, the thing that connected them and why the relationship was so important. If I can sort of just say quickly about like all the experiences, my brother met him, 20 years ago. My brother was like an up and coming yoga instructor, and Ali, they were in the same place, and Ali overheard my brother talking about yoga and like literally went over and like joined the conversation and wanted to know. So that was the kind of like open exchange dialogue person that Ali was. And I was in a room with him once, this was when Scott Coker was promoting the K1 USA events in Las Vegas. So like early 2000, 2001, 2002. It's a regular kickboxing event. They always turn out a lot of people in the ballrooms there. All of a sudden there's a ruckus, and you look and it's Muhammad Ali, and he's slowly making his way to his seat. And it just completely changed the energy of the night. Everything was elevated. You could tell the fighters had a different feel and energy than the earlier fighters before Ali showed up. It was wild. So he just had this sort of magnetism. I think they talk about it in the documentary. He had this like ability, energy to give off, and very just unique individual that I think we still need to understand, and his impact continues to be felt.
Oh, so well said. Thank you. Just real quickly, Josh, people, it's kind of like these moments with other celebrities. I think there's people who have said they've met like Bill Murray. I guess he's a great person to meet. Does anyone else have knowledge, or someone else was able to meet Ali? No.
I have on our old podcast, I had a friend of mine guest. His name is Jeff Coffin. He's the sax player for Dave Matthews Band, and used to be the Bela Fleck and the Flecktones sax player. But he told a great story that I should republish the link for, something about his encounter with Muhammad Ali and how he sprinted to just sort of meet him and had this kind of amazing, heartfelt interaction with him. So, but anyway, but that's the only person that I'm 1 degree away from that had that experience. Yeah.
Yes. Publish in the chat. That's like you could do a whole podcast of these moments because, and Josh, that is really, I love that you kind of drilled down to a core part of why he resonated so much and became so much a part of, our lives and culture.
I would like to add actually to that resonation. I know we need to introduce everyone, but in one of those degrees of Muhammad Ali interaction, I had a boss once, and she met him when she was a little girl growing up in Kentucky. And she just mentioned it one time. She's like, yeah, it was a gas station. And then, he pulled up and he saw me sitting there in the car and he came over to me and he did his magic tricks. He levitated for me, because he would perform magic tricks, and so he did his levitation where you put your hand on one surface and you lift up one leg and it looks like you're levitating. So she said as a little girl, she always thought that Muhammad Ali could fly because the way he would interact with children, I guess, or the way he interacted with her, it might be exemplative of that, the way he could resonate on so many levels with so many different people.
Yeah. No, and thank you for sharing. I love these stories. So I'm going to move now to Jillian DeCourse. Hello.
Hello.
A writer and fighter. We have Julie who
dabble a little bit.
Yes. And it's for I wrote it down for Combat Press.
Yes, it was. Right now we're like a little bit on a pause, so it's kind of like an in between, just kind of flowing with it right now.
Jillian, in the writer's world, that's called a steady gig.
Hey, Jillian, you can admit that the writing's tougher than fighting. I think you can say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, I know. Oh, thank you. And so, thank you. Yes. And you're in Invicta. Did you mention that? I don't need to.
Yeah. No.
Please. No. And I love that. I have to defer to my husband, who's I'll walk downstairs and he'll be like, "Did you just see this hilarious tweet from Jillian?" And so
one of the best MMA Twitter feeds, Jillian. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It just kind of happened. Like it wasn't intended to grow the way it was. It was just a way to kind of get my exposure, interact a little bit, and now it just became like this massive thing.
Well, now you have fans.
And you're doing something right if you're getting shout outs from CM Punk. So.
I know that was like unexpected and super cool.
Yeah. Excellent. Jillian, what about you with what is your connection or an image to Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X?
Yep. So for me, like it was like growing up, I was like, it was a little bit before my time. So I only knew like kind of like the gist of it, like the basics that we get like taught, the conversations. And it wasn't until really more recently where like I actually started to learn like the true history and the things behind it, which is, to me very fascinating. Because for me, like the main things I knew is he was like this amazing boxer, kind of changed the world of combat sports, but not the true intricacies of, what he did as like a population and how he impacted us culturally.
So good. Yes. And Jillian, I'd love to have your perspective because you were born, was it close to the, like after or before the Olympics?
I was born in 84. So I was born like, significantly before, but I don't remember like watching like Olympics like that as a kid. And in my house, like combat, I'm the first combat athlete in my family. So we weren't like a family that would watch like boxing and combat sports at all. It was kind of like we know, like, we don't, like, that's violence, like, and now look at where I'm at.
No, thank you. And I really appreciate so much on bringing your perspective and your smart, witty, thoughts as well. But Julie and I want to talk about our class right now. A significant number of our students were born in 2002. So it's so fascinating to hear their perspective of Muhammad Ali. And, I think they get into this at the end of the documentary about the narrative that's been maybe sanitized or made more of this hero, which is I don't think that is wrong, but we're leaving out something like his relationship with Malcolm X, which is not all positive. And there's a lot of rough and down areas in that. So it's very interesting to know that. And thank you for pointing out your perspective. Also being someone who may not have been a huge combat sports family. I'm glad you're turning that around for the DeCourcys.
Yeah. And it's actually been like, my mom says it all the time. She's like, I never would have thought that, like, I would have been so excited for you to like get into a fight.
I bet there are a lot of moms who never thought they'd say that statement. Yes.
Yeah. And then, it just happens and you got to go with it. And then I think too, like you realize like that it's more, there's a lot more to it. It's not violence. It's not fighting. It is a sport. And there's, a lot of aspects that go into it that are not violent in any way, shape or form.
Yeah. Oh, that we have a whole course on it at American University called Writing and Fighting, so thank you, that it is so much more than what happens in the ring or the cage. So thank you, Jillian. Josh. Hello, Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
As well. So catch us up to what.
Well, I gotta. You mentioned. So I went and got Chris's books.
Thank you.
Got two of them.
You. 2 volumes. The fine
Two
art.
volumes here. Yeah. This one just came out.
We will. You will find. Can they could probably find it through your Twitter handle. How to order. Chris, is that right? Okay. All right.
I just want to cut in real quick though, just to say that I have one of the first edition of Chris's book, and you can't get them anywhere, guys. So if somebody wants to, I might put it on eBay or something, but it'll be easily starting at 500. It is signed. Just putting that out there. Carry on. Sorry.
Use it to fund the documentary for Josh.
Yeah.
No, give that money to Chris. Give that money to Chris. I don't need. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that.
Josh, and this joke, is it as expensive as a first edition of the Iliad? I shared that with you because
lower the volume, please. Sorry.
We Iliad is actually the first. Okay. That's actually our first text that we have our students read. Has an incredible boxing scene where you see the main elements that are portrayed in modern boxing. And I always like to show a scene from Jennifer Lopez's classic Boy Next Door, where the young boy who's interested in her, teenager, she's older woman, he has brought her a first edition of the Iliad that he got for $1 at a garage store. And so
that has got to be one of the funniest jokes some person played on.
I know that got through the editing process. Now, if you're watching this, I don't have to explain that joke, right? But
just for the people at home, explain it, Nancy.
Explain it. Well, the text of the Iliad is about 3,000 years old. I think it's 700 BC, and it was written in ancient Greek verse. It was not written. That's what I'm saying. It was sung and it was memorized and passed as an oral tradition. There is no first edition. Now, there might be a first edition of an English translation when we got back to the literate age time, St. John's English, I believe you might call that, in the Judeo-Christian era, but it doesn't exist. And this is like cheers to that screenwriter who put it in there, and it got through the editing, it got through, all these people, and yes. So I don't mean to digress, but Chris, I hope yours is gonna surpass that in terms of
doubtless. All
right, sorry for that digression, Josh.
Chris built in the legend of especially the first edition of his book by only releasing 6 copies. Mm-hmm. So it immediately creates a sense of, now, thousands of years from now, people are going to be like, why can we only find 6 copies?
Ideal in manufactured scarcity.
Exactly.
Hello.
They're gonna say we're gonna find the seventh copy. There is no seventh copy.
There'll be people who are trying to make that. They'll try, but no. Wow, well done. All right.
The other comparison, I just want to say the other comparison is because I'm the one who wrote for the first edition, and I didn't, just like the Iliad, I didn't write. I just sang it to Chris. And Chris wrote down what I said. I got my lyre, and he wrote down what I said.
Sent me a bunch of MP3 files, you know.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, Chris said that he's released 2 books in the past since the pandemic began, and I was involved with both of those. So I've just sort of been writing Chris's coattails for the last 18 months. And
as we all would like to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad gig. And yeah, I'm out here in New Jersey and going back and forth between New Jersey and Brooklyn. And yeah, just writing. Things are great. Things are very good. I don't have anything all that exciting to say about what's going on. It's just when you're a writer, you just sit at a table and stare at a wall and go to the refrigerator, and that's sort of what I'm doing.
Yep. Also published a book a couple years ago, which Julie and I use as a main.
Yeah, that's true. That's a few years on now. I don't think I can't coast on that anymore.
Yes. Well, you give us money, you bribe us. No, just kidding. To be, if anyone else, if you want to get in the high point in writing and fighting, I have a Venmo. I will share now.
Mm-hmm.
We actually really enjoy it because it really helps our students with research, because you use so many lenses. And just for people, why we fight, Josh uses, he goes and tries to unpack why humans fight through biology, history, religion, psychology, so many certain things. I probably have skipped one. And what I love is that you come to my class and, you allow my students to challenge you. And thank you for doing that, because I want them to feel like they're a part of the academic conversation and to not just accept what they hear. And so I don't mean to do this to you, Josh, but sometimes I will kind of prep my students, like, how would you counter Mr. Rosenblatt's argument?
You don't call me Mr. Rosenblatt, though, do you?
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't.
Okay. They can counter all they want, but they can't call me Mr. Rosenblatt.
All right. So what is your Ali or Malcolm X moment?
I can't really think of them. I was trying to think about that actually when I was watching the movie, because they go through so many different time periods, and they talk, and I was trying to remember my first impression of Muhammad Ali. Obviously, he's one of those people that's been around our entire lives. It's just sort of like part of the culture and part of your brain. I don't remember specific, because I was trying to remember when I was sort of old enough to be aware whether he was still fighting, and I know he was, but I don't think I was paying attention to. I don't think I would have known that he fought Larry Holmes, even though I remember seeing Larry Holmes fights on TV and stuff. I remember him more. I remember sort of back and forths with Howard Cosell, and stuff like that. It's like trying to identify when the first time you remember hearing the Beatles or something. It's just sort of always there. I think the first time that I remember caring about Muhammad Ali and thinking about Muhammad Ali in any way as being this person that we all think about him now as like a really complicated, complex member of the culture, was when I saw when in college, and I saw When We Were Kings, the documentary, at college. And I don't even know why I went. I think I was just bored. I wasn't a boxing fan, and I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't even know who won the fight, which made the movie much, much better to not know who won that fight with Foreman. But I think if I went back and sort of excavated where the beginning of my fascination with combat sports started, it would probably be there. It was years and years and years before I got into MMA and before I started thinking about MMA and writing about MMA. But I think that was the first time I ever thought about fighting as being more than fighting and being really fast. I loved that. I just fell in love with that documentary. So I think my beginning with Muhammad Ali was there, even though, he was probably on game shows and television shows and talk shows that I had seen 1,000 times before that. The thing that I was thinking about when I was watching that documentary the Malcolm X Muhammad Ali documentary was, how cruel he was to Malcolm X when they had their break. And my first response was like, I really didn't like Muhammad Ali in that moment. The fact that he chose to go, someone even says one's a man and the other's an institution. And the fact that he chose to go with the institution and not with the man, I found that sort of contemptible. And I wanted to judge him so badly. And then I realized, because they showed a scene of him 5 minutes later saying, I'm young, I'm pretty, I'm 22 years old, and I just shook up the world. And they're like, Malcolm X died when Muhammad Ali was probably 23, maybe 24 years old. I mean, to both be on that level in terms of sort of being a world historical figure and dealing with Malcolm X and Malcolm X's murder and being playing a role in that drama at 23, immediate, like any contempt or anger I felt for Muhammad Ali just went away. I mean, not that he's not capable of cruelty. There are many other times in his career where he seemed capable of real cruelty to people, but I had to think, 23 years old, like, what was I doing at 23? It had nothing to do with Malcolm X and assassinations, and so that's sort of what I came away with watching when I watched the first time. Is just like how young he was to be playing a role in the world and negotiating those ideas in public was just, I could not even imagine.
Such a great point that, especially the 23 of today versus 23 in 1960s Black American, and how he was viewed in that era and what he had to uphold. I think that's such a great thing that we need to we'll definitely drill in on that later, Josh. Thank you. Because that's a really important thing, I think, that we don't always take into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we expect a lot out of someone like Muhammad Ali, probably a lot from public figures, definitely a lot from public Black figures, the expectation of what, Black people are supposed to be at certain ages, and the way the culture and the way the United States is willing to treat Black people who are, many times just children and not being treated like children. I mean, he's really a demonstration of that, to be 23 years old and 22 years old and to be expected to carry what he carried. It's sort of beyond comprehension. It's an issue with Muhammad Ali, as I'm sure we'll discuss, and they discuss in the movie, that he's both a sanitized figure, but also like when someone becomes part of is such a part of the fabric and like the wallpaper, just like he's everywhere, that it's easy to forget that he's a person, and that he's that he was not always a wise figure, that he had to get there.
Not an image. Yeah.
I mean, Malcolm X at 23 was probably, I don't know exactly what the timing was. He was probably either in prison or pimping or running numbers. So it's all pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's probably, we're going to go back to that when we open up for our, intense, and I want you guys throwing these questions and thoughts out there, because I love that I have this great group of people to really dig in. And I'm going to move to my my husband, Greg Kidder. This is his first. Are you nervous, Greg, to be on Writing and Fighting?
A little bit, yes. All of these, honored guests. So yeah, I'm Greg. I'm Nancy's husband, so I'm officially the least qualified person to be here. I'm downstairs in the dining room, while Nancy's upstairs in the bedroom, the way we've been for the last however many months.
Yeah.
I'm a tax lawyer, which is actually not as irrelevant as it sounds, since fighters often have huge tax issues. And there was a pretty big tax issue related to the fight of the century being held in New York and disputes with the New York authorities. But I won't bore people with taxes, but we come back to it at maybe a later class.
Tax episode, Greg, where you get to just go wild.
Right. But I would say, for like my first Muhammad Ali memory, like, to be honest, was probably like sitting there, like, because I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in 77. So I'd have been 11 or 12 playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out with the cheat codes, trying to play Tyson over and over again. And I remember somebody's dad saying something to the effect of, you guys know Tyson's not the greatest boxer, right? It was this guy, Muhammad Ali. And we're like, who is that? Because it'd be, a little bit past, as Josh said, a little bit past the time when he was actively fighting. You're like, oh, who's this fighter? And the first thing someone would say was, well, that wasn't his real name. Or we would say given name now, but back then he would say wasn't his real name. Yeah, he changed his name, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You're like, oh, okay. So probably the first two things you hear are this guy was a great fighter and he changed his name because he was Muslim. And then I don't think I really thought of him much at all, other than kind of the way you would think about like Babe Ruth or sort of this distant legendary memory. And so when, like Julie described, I saw him at the Atlanta Games, that was like this, almost this ghost, this beloved ghost. And I always go back to this sort of memory of someone's dad telling me about this fighter, when I always think of the line in David Remnick's book, King of the World, which I love, where he talks about, if you're of a certain age, go ask your father two things. Did he watch the fight of the century, and who was he rooting for? And there's an extremely high probability that yes, he watched it. And second, he was rooting for Frazier. And Nancy and I both did that. And both of our dads, who are quite different people with different political views, both of them said, yeah, I was rooting for Frazier. And so I think, how do you go from this kind of reviled, controversial figure to this acknowledged legend of the sport, to this mythical, iconic symbol of unity, which in many ways is somewhat of the opposite of what he started as part of kind of the whitewashing that Julie mentioned. And that's what I find very, very, very fascinating. That this is an image that we license and use on t-shirts like the one you're wearing and elsewhere in a time that we sort of view as divisive, even though you can make a pretty strong case that now is very less divisive than 1964 or the period covered in this documentary. How do you go from that to this corporate cash image that people want to identify with? I think is quite interesting.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Nancy.
No.
That's such a good point, Greg. And that brings me to mind in the documentary, and now my mind is completely blanking on who said it. It was either Malcolm X's, it was one of his relatives, I think, but it might have been someone else who said, I don't think he ever would have imagined being on a US government stamp from the way he was treated. Yeah. And I think it really becomes interesting how we process this. I can't speak for, I don't know everybody on this panel well enough to know how you identify or, what your backgrounds are. But even here, I feel like, okay, 40-year-old white cis woman talking about Muhammad Ali, like she knows everything. You know what I mean? Like I honestly don't have the experience of being a Black person or a Black Muslim person growing up in America, especially in the 1960s, especially with those struggles. And just in that documentary, we have been exposed, my generation, of course, the generation after me, everybody's much younger than me now, but to some really shocking imagery and some really insane things. But to have the image of Emmett Till, just absolutely part of your childhood and part of your fears, not just your fears, pushed away or abstract, but actually in your face fears every single day, is not something, because of my upbringing, because of my, privilege, I've not experienced that before. But just to think about the way things get really turned around. Muhammad Ali is on t-shirts now, Malcolm X is on stamps. It's so interesting to see the way people's narratives have been, I don't know if it's edited, probably it's always edited, changed, possibly evolved, possibly devolved over time, through media. So, and my dog is barking. I've got to.
Oh no, don't. I think this is so great. And I'm Nancy Kidder. I co-teach writing and fighting at American University. And I was going to bring up, and I think this will lead into everything, that my experience of first knowledge. And it's interesting, Greg, you talked about how like both of our sets of parents, different politically, rooted for Frazier. My parents, we don't see eye to eye very much, everything, but I do on Muhammad Ali, I sometimes, my dad will share something, and he talked about watching, I think it was either Thrill in Manila or Rumble in the Jungle, how he went, and Josh, you might be able to tell me on the time frame, because he went during, he went to a closed circuit television, which is, my students, when I describe what you had to do to see these fights, and he waited in line, and then there was like a show, or there were people there. It was like this whole big thing. And my dad talked about how exciting it was to go and see this event, and obviously he wasn't thinking about the geopolitics or anything, but it was just how much he saw it as like the world. He was connecting to the world, kind of, that we had all of these people. So it's interesting that I have that commonality. And at that point, Greg, you said that at that point they wanted Frazier to win. I think that the public sentiment starts to change towards Ali after like the fight of the century. He goes through that and he beats George Foreman, and you have that last fight. And then, as many students of mine who are younger, they really only know him as the hero and as the person who triumphed, went through civil rights and swiftly made it through. And this is my opening question, is what do we learn about the relationship of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali that we hadn't, that this documentary provided more nuance? Because, is there kind of a narrative of Malcolm X and him that, do some people believe they're friends? Do people focus on the rift? What does this reveal? And chime in. I'll send you a first edition of Iliad if you chime in.
I'll say something here. I just wanted to say that I think that what it brought in great relief to me that I had not really explored or thought about before, it's kind of obvious, but I was pondering the fact that Malcolm X's life was so abbreviated and cut short and brutal, and at the same time, Ali's life was kind of prolonged. And, Greg, when you talked about this ghost, it just, for some reason, it just gave me the thought of, in the later years, for somebody to be known for being so vocal and so confrontational and so challenging, to now be sort of reduced to this kind of living kind of embodiment of this sort of energy that's left, but none of the bombast or any of that for such an incredibly long period of time. This kind of marination of all of that energy that he put out over time. I just found it really fascinating to see it's like when he and Malcolm X were at closer points of their arcs, how there was such kind of opposition. And it made me think about what breeds, like a lot of best friends that I ever have are people I hated when I met them, or, the nature of conflict. I found really interesting in all this. But I guess I was just thinking, wow, like what if Malcolm X had the same sort of prolonged, kind of life, and would he have, how would he have morphed or changed, or, would the definitions be so much about sort of, are you being an Uncle Tom, or are you, taking this high road, or this kind of parallel to the Martin Luther King sort of approach, or whatever. So anyway, I just found it was really, I had not really thought about in such relief the nature of their lives and their timelines, and how those played out to be these incredibly large contrasts when you look at them retroactively.
Yes, please chime in on your thoughts about, this is a open flowing discussion.
Is that the teacher saying I didn't answer the question?
No, you did. You did answer it.
Okay.
So now you're supposed to offer up. No, another thing, I really love that you, and can I just say this? I want to just answer. There's a certain time period, and I know probably the Ken Burns, like one of the sections. It's going to be on, what is it, 1962? Is it 64? And like, I believe like 40 minutes of the documentary is 64 between, is it 65 when Malcolm X is assassinated?
Right.
And so, wow, like also this only takes place within a year and a half. And it's so amazing how these moments had so much weight. And I want to know if people thought about that and your thoughts of how they portrayed it. I'm opening it up. I could go on, but please chime in.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris.
So there's one kind of inadvertent kind of a retconning that I think happens, which is really, really beneficial in the long term. You know, we have this thing where Muhammad Ali has been elevated to like, you know, in the beginning of the movie, they talk about how he was really happy to represent America at the Olympics and happy to, you know, be literally like represent America, but not get to participate in it and live in it. And that was part of his disillusion and his whole transition to Islam. And, you know, he goes on to have this profound life. And then when he finally passes away, we elevate him. Now he's an icon. Now he literally gets to represent America forever. And that in a way retroactively shines a different light on Malcolm X. And I feel like Malcolm X is the kind of figure who could have been written off almost entirely. And I'm very much basing this on like, you know, my education, you know, my exposure to the way, you know, what the working class people who send their kid to a private school would be capable of like financing, what the kind of education I was able to get. And it's of, you know, iconic figures who we can say, this is America, this is what it is, even when there are people like Martin Luther King who sought to change America. And Malcolm X is the kind of figure who gets glossed over in its entirety. But to see Muhammad Ali achieve the status that he did, both as within this country and globally, I kind of hope that it would be the thing that changes the narrative on who Malcolm X was and what he had to contribute by proxy, by association.
Oh, I think that's so interesting to talk about by proxy being such a pivotal role in society. That, you know, knowing who's the right messenger and knowing that that's what Malcolm X. Josh, are you chiming in, or is that just noise?
I was going to chime in, but that was my dog shaking his.
The dog wanted you to chime in.
Yeah, no, he did the job for me. I appreciate this discussion. I think it's really interesting to hear these different perspectives and takes on Ali. And I don't think I answered your first question correctly. Like my first interaction or thought of Ali, you know, I grew up in LA, and that's where Ali settled. And if you remember, like there was this kind of moment where he talked a man off a ledge in the 80s in a building here, and that was big news. And I remember that in the news. And I was always interested in sports. And so I read a lot of sports writers. And so I read about Muhammad Ali and different things. And he made obviously a lot of content. So, you know, that's how I knew him and grew into him. And then I watched a lot of boxing growing up. But I feel like learning about him as a larger societal figure, cultural figure, came in as I grew older and could sort of understand some of the things that he did. And so much of the popular media that's been created about him. I mean, When We Were Kings is absolutely transformative movie. And I think it was the first sort of introduction for a new generation of people to understand how Ali could resonate, why he was so important, and just this various pieces of him that still mattered to so many people. So, you know, I think his connection to Malcolm X is incredibly significant. And I think for reasons that sometimes aren't discussed, one thing I think we should understand about a lot of these films is, and I'm not casting aspersions on like the journalism that's done or the directing, but like they're usually signed off by the Ali estate. So I've heard a lot of sort of in this conversation about like the narrative and like, you know, what's the truth about him and how much do we know, how much myth making goes on. I think we've seen enough coverage of Ali to have a real sense of the man's life. Like, we're not being fooled by any kind of narrative, really. But you've got to be aware when you're watching these pieces, like what's the perspective, where it's coming from. One thing I thought that was missing in this movie, and has been missing in a large part about Ali's relationship to the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X, was the sort of the tentacles of the Nation of Islam and on Ali, and how it sort of grabbed Ali for itself and used him. And he was a massive fundraiser for the Nation of Islam. A lot of the money he made throughout his career with the Nation of Islam, and then he built mosques all over the place for the Nation of Islam. So Ali was a major force. I think the powers that be recognized what he could be, and they recognized what Malcolm X was. And he was for all intents and purposes, a truth-sayer. He was a truth zealot, so he was willing to go down with the ship. And that kind of person's extremely dangerous. So, I think, we can get in a lot of, we can have conversations about what if this person had been alive and what would happen over the next few years. We could never possibly know. And I think maybe almost it's like hard to contemplate, but what if Malcolm X had not been assassinated? It's 1968 and the civil rights movement is in massive full swing, and, Martin Luther King gets killed, and, the voice of the people now is Malcolm X. I mean, that's something to contemplate that's almost too big. But I think the fact that we talk about Malcolm X today is because he had important things to say, but his relationship with Ali elevated those things to a place where they became aware in the sort of popular zeitgeist. The people sort of understood these things for the first times in their lives because of the characters involved and what they brought. So I wish we would see more about the Nation of Islam and its real relationship with Ali, and how he had to work to separate himself from that. Even the book that I wrote covers a period where he was being managed by Herbert Mohammed, who was connected to the Nation of Islam. And, these sorts of things. He fought a lot. He made a lot of money, and he made plenty of it. But, his family probably didn't get as much as they should have in the end. Other people did. That's one thing I wish was missing in a story that I feel like I know pretty well. And just a shout out to One Night in Miami. If you haven't seen that, you should see that. Really great sort of sense and story about, this time and place. And one of the angles that they covered in the film was that night, the motel in Miami and everything that came out. That was just I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Is it Hampton Hall, I believe, is the name of and it was a colored only hotel with segregation. Josh, thank you. I really appreciate it. I felt the same way. Julie and I were actually talking about it before class about the Nation of Islam. Was it because they wanted certain people to interview, because they bring in people who have been with Elijah Muhammad and Ali, and they're bringing them on to have their voice. But what did it do for a realistic view of what Nation of Islam was actually in terms of its manipulation? I don't want to use the word manipulation, but I'm going to, because I don't have anything to lose. And what it was, its true aim was, because I felt that was softened. And that I wanted more. Greg, I know you.
No, I was just going to make it a point related to that, which is one of the things that I thought I appreciated more watching this documentary that I hadn't fully appreciated when seeing sort of past portrayals of Ali and Malcolm X, which I think is portrayed briefly in both the Spike Lee movie on Malcolm X and the Michael Mann movie on Ali, is that Ali is substantially younger than Malcolm X. Like, Muhammad Ali's 22 in 1964 and Malcolm X is 38, I believe. There's a 16-year gap between them. And I think in my memory, because Malcolm X was assassinated, I think of him as younger. My memories of Ali are from the When We Were Kings documentary and these other things. And so to go to the point of this influence of this like gigantic organization on somebody who's 22 years old, right? And we forget that when we talk about Ali in this time frame, just how young he was. And I'm not sure I ever really thought about that difference before they kind of juxtaposed both their lives together in the documentary. And I thought about it differently in that context.
I think one of the things as well that got left out of this movie, and that kind of gets left out of the narrative, is how brilliant both men were as well in their own rights. Like Malcolm X's ability to put words together and to really convey them in such a way that it would rouse, groups of people, that it would influence them so well. I mean, he was a very, very good writer. And Muhammad Ali wasn't just the beautiful performances in the cage, right? This is a man who studied Sugar Ray Robinson's footwork, who studied film, who really worked his ass off. His brain was very, very sharp, which kind of makes our later images of him almost all the more tragic. But the fact that, and I guess I am combat minded. I do tend to think of Ali first when I'm thinking about the duo. I think, that's he's my entrance almost into this world in a lot of ways. And when I think about, I don't know, I think about being very young and being really smart, but also heavily influenced by people who are like, okay, we're going to take your brain and we're going to put it in this direction. And you've got a great voice, kid. Get out there and use it. You do. It is interesting to see that, what a cultivated figure he was, under, I wouldn't say the reins of other people, because I don't think that's the appropriate term, but under the influence of all of these forces.
Yeah. No,
I was just going to say, I mean, it's such an age-old thing, right? You see people that have to, or people tend to look towards institutions like religion, to make sense of a world that they've been sort of cast into, whether it was, as much as he wanted to be what he was and projected and manifested to be what he was, there's still the reality of, now I'm here, now I am this. And you're probably looking for some sort of sanctity in a world that's not rich with it. And so, it's tough to look at any institution that takes anybody under their wing in that way and not be skeptical on some level of, was this an altruistic sort of alliance or entanglement, or was it something also made of perhaps opportunism? And I'm sure that's probably more, you guys probably know more about it than I do, but I grew up Catholic, but then, rejected it because, I didn't like the communion very much. But my battle with sort of religion was, I had a choice and could just kind of walk away from it. And I never really felt like I needed anything on that level. I can't imagine being in that position in life and feeling like you're so unmoored yet so directed at the same time.
So true.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the interesting things about my reaction. I was a far more religious person the first time I sort of learned about Nation of Islam, first time I learned about these things, than I am now. And I was Lutheran, not Catholic, but it's the closest Protestant denomination to
Catholic light.
Yeah.
Exactly. We would use that term. And so now that I'm sort of less religious as an individual, some of the things are a little bit harder to relate to. It's harder to just think of it as, well, this is just what, this person believes compared to what you believe. You sort of have a similar institutional skepticism if you've come to be skeptical of the own institutions in which you grew up in. And so I did find myself thinking about the story a little differently.
Yeah. I also think it was Josh or something, I think also Josh Gross and Josh Rosenblatt brought up how we view, and Julie, I think the age of a person now in 2020s versus, and obviously it's not even just a male, a Black male in this era, and what expectations we have and what he was going through. And I also had this idea of, they used a lot of press conferences and, to get their ideas of who they were. Obviously, Josh, it's great that you bring up One Night in Miami, because no one really knows what was said in that hotel room, but that's the thing. Like we don't have those personal, back and forth. I'm not saying the FBI does. I'm not going to go down that road, but that's also a part of this. I had to think that now with social media, that these exchanges were kind of kept, they would be shown to the world between 6 and 7 in your time zone, and also in print. And how now what we do, and how, you know, someone like Elijah Muhammad, I'm not trying to make parallels, you can do that yourself, you know, how he may have been viewed differently, and what did they have more power because when there was less content, so they became more of the narrative, or because we have so much content, you know, are we making people and bringing them, and they have to conform to something?
I think they told a story in the film of a reporter out there seeing that he thought that Ali was with Malcolm X and is he in the Nation of Islam, and chasing him around. I mean, I think that's the sort of the classic image we have of old school reporters, you know, wearing the suit and the hat and walking around with the camera around their neck. And, you know, that kind of energy existed. People were getting soups. The newspaper business extremely competitive. And by that time, he was heavyweight champion of the world and a gold medal winner. So he was already sort of Muhammad Ali, you know, in coming. I want to say, sort of to an earlier point, you know, he made a choice to join the Nation of Islam. It doesn't mean that he also manipulated in that process of figuring out what to do for himself. But, you know, it sounded like he was deliberate in the time that he took to understand what it was, having conversations with Malcolm X. He'd been having conversations with Malcolm X for years before he decided to come out and represent the movement. And as a choice to do that, you know, there's always a lot of conversation about the choice to do that and what he may have given up. And, you know, he's sort of losing these corporate opportunities, whatever people would have deduced you have to lose in terms of money or whatever, you know, that ended up not being the thing that dominated his thinking. He, you know, he really had to sort of make a decision about what's the most radical thing I could do. You joining the Nation of Islam as the heavyweight champion of the world and change your name is probably among the most radical things he could have done. And that, whether he was intending or not, you know, that obviously changed how people viewed him. It changed what he could say and what he could represent. And he was already wanting to do that. I think, you know, he thought that this was the best way he could affect the world for people like him. Yeah. And he was willing to take that risk. It sounds stupid to say Muhammad Ali's gutsy, right? But he's not just like a fighter tough or a fighter brave. He's a figure, like in our history, we remember him because of how many stances he took that could have knocked him off his obviously destined path. Yeah. And I think for all those reasons, we want to understand exactly why this decision was made and how he got to this point, and following him as the media did, and all the documentaries we're seeing today and the books that still exist and the stuff we're going to still learn because he's an enormous figure. I mean, Ken Burns is going to show us stuff about, hopefully we'll learn things about Ali's life or have a new frame through which to see him. All that stuff's still coming. And I think that's just how enormous a figure he was. And he came at a time where all this media was generated about him. He was a historical figure who was captured in real time. They didn't have social media, but we can go back and go through all that stuff and go through it again and live it in a way for the first time. And I think a lot of us are still doing that.
Thank you, Josh, so much. What I want to take from that, thank you, because you're bringing me back to the interaction between these two. And that's what this is focusing on, and what that reveals about their relationship. And I guess this is what I would like to kind of ask yourself, or, someone please. Do you think they were trying to bring about the a explanation, or I guess that the word is regret is brought up a couple times. Do you think that they were also hoping to have this narrative that there was a regret that the relationship ended the way it did? And do you think that that's something that they're carving out, or is it something that is being revealed? Can I just
answer that briefly? Yeah. I think as a device, as a director, somebody who's sitting down on camera, you that's why you could hear the director's voice when they brought up regret, because they didn't want to. I think they fairly didn't want to make it sound, if it came up, as if someone else was bringing it up on their own, right? So they posed that question, so we saw that. I also think that they handle it right. I mean, it's said on this conversation, Muhammad Ali was a man. Yeah. He's going to regret things. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to screw up. Whether he's a kid or a man later in life, he'll make bad choices. So it's important not to forget that. And, the idea of regret's important to that as well, right? If you make mistakes and you're a person who's honest with themselves and you want to move forward in the right way, you probably have some regret and you understand and move forward from that. So I think it's a fair thing to explore with his brother. It was a great question. And I appreciated the Rahman Ali's answers, honestly, to that as well.
No, and because I think if there's anything that the takeaway that I thought was revealed in this documentary was that we need to know the nuances of the relationship, and that it's not, as easy and you can put concrete how it happened. So we have about 10 more minutes. And, I would love to kind of wrap up with anything else you guys saw in this, whether it was the music or the structure of it, like if we're going to go into close read. Jillian, your thoughts on the documentary?
So, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was informative. It showed me a lot of things that I wasn't really aware of from a different perspective. And it's actually funny because a couple of days before we interacted about doing this, I skimmed across and I was like, oh, I've added it to my list of things to watch. And then I'm like, wow, what a small world. So for me, it was, a lot of things learning about the relationship of Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X that I was not aware of, the extent of the relationship. And I think a big part of his success could be linked to, being Muslim and the strictness that came with it, because it took away a lot of the temptations that are in just normal society, because he was so disciplined within his belief system.
Great point. And I think that this has to be said, Muhammad Ali is Muhammad Ali because he had these talks with Malcolm X and joined Nation of Islam. Was it Cornel West who coined them the two freest Black men? And that era.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yes. And, the fact, and that says so much about what the Black Muslim movement did. No, thank you for that insight. Oh, hi, Chris.
Yeah, it's getting ready for bed.
Any other insight in terms of people who are going to view this film, what they should appreciate?
The soundtrack is unbelievable. It is just out of control how good it is. There's a lot of obviously a lot of Curtis Mayfield and things like that, but the Afrobeat stuff really took me by surprise. That's, if anybody is curious about other Black movements, reading about Fela Kuti and listening to his music, Jesus Christ, there's not much more rewarding than that. So that was a real bonus to the whole thing. I like that. I thought that was a subtle way of furthering this narrative of a Black nation and a Black movement that was more than just about an individual. But to also say one other thing about Muhammad Ali as an individual, we go through this, every 5 years or so, where somebody in pop culture or political culture achieves some sense of singular status, and then they kind of crumble under the weight of their own fame. And it's profound that he would be able to, maintain that level of whatever you want to call it, dignity for decades. Irrespective of the cultural shifts that he was kind of at the forefront of. It's really quite profound when you think about what a giant of a man he was for so long. Some people can do it for a while. Not many people can do it for a lifetime.
So true. I want to go back to you bring up the soundtrack, the Bob Marley Redemption song. I thought that was so well placed in the documentary, because I think it's like, is that when they're separate in Africa, and and knowing that song's written about Marcus Garvey, and I was just like, I had to go and find the song and and put it on my playlist. So you'll definitely, I think they did very diligently working with the narrative.
Agreed.
Yeah, Julie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really love that you brought our attention there, Chris. And I was just wondering, what else do people think we've left out of this conversation, or what? I mean, there's so many things, obviously, but what did we get wrong, or what did we leave out, or like, what else needs to be added besides everything? And
I think the only thing that I have that sort of lingers is, as much as we are evaluating this, and by the way, but Chris, you're spot on with the soundtrack. And I wanted to side note, just say that the imagery, some of the photographs, it's like unbelievable. This would never, in the age of everybody has a camera, you'll never get photos that are that timely and good. I saw some of the most amazing photographs in that documentary, but I guess I just wanted to talk about sort of turning to kind of the future. It's like, just like everything else, you think about Led Zeppelin, or you think, I don't know, anything like, can these things ever happen again? Is there anything that will ever allow circumstantially, and just the way that culture works now, for these sort of eclipses to sort of culminate and occur? Or are we just going to always be sort of looking back at these as sort of these harbingers, but these crossroads, that cannot be ever done or created, or circumstances that can't ever manifest again.
So true. And Brian, I'm so glad you're bringing that up. That's such an interesting thing, and also that through streaming, we have this on our phones. A couple of people mentioned When We Were Kings. I will put that in the link here on YouTube, along with some of the other books that we brought up, and films. It is 1994, won the Oscar. When I first started teaching this in 2017, it was only available via DVD that I had to get, and there was one copy at the AU library. So it was very challenging to show this to my students, and it was much more easier to give them another documentary that HBO has on, YouTube or something like that. And now I'll have to say, I have the pleasure, and Julie, you understand this, when the students watch something and they go nuts, and it really is amazing to watch that and to see how well that brings in the context, the music of that part. And so I'm loving that you're putting it. So again, we're having so much content now. I'm wondering, how will we maybe have, how will we process these documentaries? Do you remember when Ken Burns used to have like your 7-set DVD or maybe cassette tapes of Civil War? I know you had them, Julie. Do you think it's going to be something that, I hope, this is my hope, that you have this text, this living text now that people can access, and that they can understand and have context much more quicker, my example is that now I have When We Were Kings, and my students, it explodes in their head, the whole idea of Muhammad Ali. Or is there possible danger with so much content, or will things be lost?
We're at a place now where everything is being commodified and cheapened and created. I just look at the landscape right now, and I just think, where is there any meaning, right? We're trying to derive meaning out of like what Jake Paul is doing and how he's this, or whatever. It's, I'm becoming quite the curmudgeon, my late 40s here, but it's like, I just look at it in the landscape of what's going on right now versus then. And I just think, God, like everything was so flavorful and spiritual and deep and just with all this intention. And then now we have Conor McGregor running around or whatever. It's just like, I don't know. So I don't know if that really addresses what you said, but I just feel like I needed to say it.
I don't know. I feel like there's always been a lot of crap. Like there's always been.
Yeah.
We're nostalgizing a little
Josh
bit. Like,
Gross,
it wasn't always
that's
that
the
great.
quote. The quote of the show. There's always been a lot of crap.
I mean, there has. There's also been a lot of great art, and I'm so glad. Like When We Were Kings is a masterful piece of art, and that's why it's impactful.
Totally.
There's a lot of documentaries you can show people about Muhammad Ali, and they'll fall asleep. So it takes great art, and that's the stuff that gets recognized, and hopefully a lot of that continues.
Thanks for putting me back on earth, Josh. I appreciate it.
No worries, man.
I'm going to share.
I'd like to think that all these opportunities to create, all this opportunity to build content, to tell stories, out of some of that will rise really, really important work. And people just need to be honest and be creative in their own way. And if they can bring art to it, then that's the stuff we remember. So hopefully, Nancy, hopefully we get a lot of that.
I hope so too. No, I agree. And I do think that art that connects to people, that it does rise. Julie, you want to say what you're wondering, that there will be art?
No, I was being totally sarcastic. You're right, though. Like, there has always been crap, and the stuff that is actually very, very good transcends whatever I think social parameters, or what, not even parameters, whatever boundaries put on art. Oh, I sound like Jeff Goldblum, but art finds a way, right? I mean, it really does. We find there's a way for somehow for us, the best of ourselves, to actually be out there. And then I made a joke and I said trill art, but I'm gonna excuse myself from that joke. Chris, you were saying something.
Oh, it was definitely more mischievous. This is Josh, you were saying there's a documentary inside you that you want. This is the series that I want, and this is completely antagonistic. I know that I acknowledge this ahead of time, but all of these really profound, famous photos where like Ruby Bridges is going to school and there's a whole mob, like screaming behind her, and there are a couple, like there's these famous lynching photos and everybody's just hanging out there. It's like, come on, can we do like a 23andMe? Can we just track down everyone from this photo and like revisit them and talk to them? This is the documentary series I want to see. I want to see the documentary series of every person in the crowd who's like on the wrong side of history, just catch up with them. This is, having seen all of these things,
it's like,
and these
like
famous photos. Yeah. This is this is my take on the famous photos that we had in this documentary series. I always want that. I always want to there's a great gag in, I think it's Key and Peele, where they a bunch of black people take 23andMe and they're all related to Thomas Jefferson. I would love to see one where people are like, oh yeah, that's my dad yelling at those little children trying to go to school and get out of the pool. I'm waiting for that. All right, so forgive me for derailing things, or at least
details are
Thank
the
you.
best moments. I love it. Oh yeah, you've already upped your price, by the way. So, Greg, is there anything that you wanted to express? If someone is going to go watch this documentary, what they should anticipate?
I think it's an interesting place to start off from, and there's a lot of other documentaries mentioned on here that you can watch that spin off of on both, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. And one thing I think is interesting to think about, and Ken Burns alluded to this a little bit on that preview show we watched, is if Malcolm X is often contrasted with Martin Luther King, right? That's how Spike Lee ended Do the Right Thing, with parallel quotes from them. And Muhammad Ali at times can be contrasted with Jackie Robinson, who we remember in sort of different ways. And Ken Burns has done a documentary on Jackie Robinson, and I think kind of talking about the four of those individuals in the future could be interesting, and just how we think about them, how we remember them, how we teach them, who teaches them, and what we say is just something I'll be thinking about as I'm watching this 8 hours of Muhammad Ali next weekend.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I would love to convene. Are they doing it sequentially, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday?
Yeah, it's 2 hours Sunday, 2 hours Monday, 2 hours Tuesday, 2 hours Wednesday, rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think, as it was alluded to, they pick like specific groups of times to do each 2 hours.
Got it. I'm thinking that this group would probably be like junkies and just like, you know, go every day. I would love maybe to reconvene at some point because I know it takes longer. And this is at your local PBS station, or I believe they put them right on pbs.org. You could stream it. Yes. So Greg, Julie, and I, we actually, for the local PBS station, they had a webinar Q&A session. We did not get our questions in to.
No, I'm really mad at
I know.
Burns. I'm mad at him. I asked like 4 questions.
I love it. And it was interesting because they had the panel with Clarissa Shields. I thought that was interesting because they were exploring, you know, how, you know, as an athlete and, you know, bringing that conversation. And then it was like, I'm trying to get my notes on this of who, oh, here it is. Malcolm Jenkins, you know, the 2-time, I think, NFL champion. So they brought them in and, but, you know, we didn't get our questions in. It was interesting. What I love is that Julie and I were just we were looking at Ken Burns' background. You know, he has really bad lighting, which we were like, wow, you know, I love Ken. He keeps it real. And it was a dining room. And he had this, you couldn't escape seeing it.
An inexplicable cooler. Sorry, I stepped on you.
No,
inexplicable.
No.
Like, what's in the box, Ken?
I think he's a Corona guy. Maybe. I don't know. But it was just like so, and you know, and now I know that this is probably what my students are doing. And you know, but anyway, but we are very excited about you know, thank you guys for bringing and really giving us some insight and analysis of what this film does and how it becomes part of another text of Muhammad Ali and, you know, Malcolm X, and what that relationship is, how we can, you know, learn from it, look at it differently. And, you know, I'm going to invite you guys, you know, for a later Friday at some point where we can discuss the Ken Burns, because, you know, you'll get the invite. You know, I hope you come because, you know, this is my jam. So I'm in heaven this week. Anyone have anything coming out that they want to discuss? Jillian, do you have a fight?
Nothing lined up as of yet, but we're hoping sometime soon. Fingers crossed.
All right. You'll look for that on, and again, I think we've endorsed your Twitter handle.
Yes, I appreciate that. I like the love. Thank you.
What is your Twitter handle? Is it at Jillian?
Nope, at Lionheart Jill.
Oh, Lionheart. Of course I know.
Yeah.
Lionheart.
We gotta make it kind of cool.
I love it. Anyone else? Josh, are you anything we should be watching for? Can I ask you a question? As a soccer or football aficionado, obviously we you know, we have the World Cup coming. We had their first qualifying, but more importantly, do you watch Ted Lasso?
I don't have Apple Plus or Apple TV, so no.
Well,
I feel like I'm the only person in the world who hasn't seen it and fallen in love with it head over heels. So I just know that I would too, and that's enough for me. That's good.
I love it. You'll scoop up our enjoyment.
Everybody's like, "Oh, this show's amazing. It reaffirms my life." I'm like, "Great, me too."
Will the U.S. make the World Cup?
Yes.
Well, because they're opening up more spots, correct?
Maybe. The second yes was not as strong as the first yes. So I don't know. I'm like fingers crossed. I was very depressed. It's still one of the things that affects me in sports. Like when they didn't make the World Cup 3.5 years ago, I was depressed for a day and a half. Like I watched it standing outside of a bar on a street, watching them lose to Trinidad and Tobago. Like, and it was just like, I was like, we're not going to make the World Cup. I think most people just figure any country that wants the World Cup goes to the World Cup, but you have to qualify.
You have to qualify. I know. Well, I know now to go to hang out on your Twitter to what's going on and what's happening there. Chris, is there anything up and coming? We now know that there's a what are we up to? What are the bids up to? 15,000 or 15?
Oh man, it's out of control. Well, I just launched a Twitch channel, and I put it up on my Twitter. It's in my Twitter profile at Rini MMA, and I'm going to be on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at 11 a.m. For about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Basically, you get to hang out in the studio while I draw the book. So that's cool. And today was kind of a goof day. I don't know if you guys saw that Tony Ferguson meme that went on. Actually, yes. Jillian was killing it.
Gave me some good content.
Killing it. Oh yeah, you were killing it. I loved yours. So I illustrated a bunch of the ones that I enjoyed. Yeah, I had a blast. It was hilarious. I'll tweet out the finished drawings on Monday.
Did you do the first one, which is what was it? If
Vamp
Ferguson played a vampire, or
yeah. I had to. I mean, they kicked it off.
Yeah,
they kicked it off. I had to do it. So yeah.
And I'm not even explain that because you got to be knowing Tony Ferguson to know all that.
Yeah.
I love it. And can you interact with you on Twitch? Like, can I send you a message, or we're just voyeurs?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. People. In fact, it's way better if people talk to me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I have a new way to procrastinate. So thank you.
Yeah. 3 days a week, man. Just do something other than work. That's what I'm about.
Julie, do you have you're going? You're doing some MMA training.
I'm just teaching a seminar in North Carolina, and I'm hoping to double mask as much as possible. We'll see. But I keep my Twitter account locked. Send a request. Let me know. But you guys I follow all you. So yeah, it's only because I want to stay employed. So yeah.
And Julie, and writing and finding is your side gig.
It's a good gig.
Yes. That's a good gig. But you actually have a full time at University of Kansas, working. I can't explain it.
Well, I'm trying to keep it so they don't let the Kansas State Department of Education find me. But I work with a program. We help. It's a really cool program, and it involves helping children with severe cognitive disabilities. They're able to. It's making things accessible and that sort of thing. Although that's not my branch. I usually edit things or post links. So
9 to 5, she does that. On her breaks, she tells her team, I'm going to go. You can't do a cigarette break anymore, but then she comes to writing and fighting and then sees a student who has a question. So,
someday another Invicta, I hope. Haven't been told, but waiting for the call. So.
No, the heart and soul of Invicta, Julie Kedzie. I guess we have Brian. Anything last words?
I forget about a lot of the things that I've done, but I could probably point out to you guys, you might appreciate. I contributed to a documentary called Promised Land. It's about Ja Morant, who's a phenom for the Memphis Grizzlies, who's quite an amazing young man and story. And it's a 6-part sort of series, directed by Dexton Debary, who did the And1 documentary and a bunch of other cool stuff. That was the thing that I was running around last summer. I don't know if I told you, I lived in an RV for 2 weeks and went all around and shot all this stuff. But so that's out. It's actually on what's it called? Crackle. So,
how do we find that? Okay.
Yeah. So it's called Promised Land. It's really cool. So I'm,
wow.
Just to see going to his house where his dad built him a court, and just his sort of undersized kind of underdog story is just a really cool story. And he's, his whole life is still yet to be told, but it's this great, it follows him through the draft and, the COVID and NBA and the cancellations and all the George Floyd and all of that. So it's a really neat documentary. So it's called Promised Land. So I'm happy to see that came out. And then there's another one. I'll find the link for it somewhere. I think it came out on what's it called? Topic. It's called Invaluable Land that I contributed to. I shot a bunch of stuff down in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel. the Civil Rights Museum and all that down there. And it's just a really neat documentary series. And this was just one episode. It focuses on specific places where tragic or terrible things happened and then sort of documents kind of what has happened since then and what has blossomed from that has been potentially positive or whatever. So that's a neat thing. I put out a couple of records. I almost learned how to fly. And then I've got my own sort of, business, documentaries that, you don't care about, if you really want to learn more about real estate, I can send you to some of those documentaries or whatever, but the ones that pay the bills. But yeah, I'm staying super busy, but I just thought you would appreciate, if anything, the Promised Land documentary. So
in my lane. So I'm going to find those and put them. And I think, can you also go to briansiskin.com?
I don't think I have it set up properly anymore, but it's just thosedrones.com.
Because I don't know if you've figured it out by now, the drone camera is, I would call Brian the premier drone cinematographer. I'm going to say it, you know, in the North American world, at least. I'm going to go with it.
I'm getting ready to work on I feel like talk about the old man thing. Like one of the biggest rock bands of our time is the Black Keys, right? I don't care about the Black Keys at all, but I'm working on a documentary for them that I'm not supposed to be talking about. So I didn't say anything.
We don't know anything. I love that you threw that, Brian. What a killer move that was.
Very unimpressed by the whole flying thing, Brian, but now I am truly impressed.
The band that we won't talk about, but everyone knows he's doing. Brian, I'm so happy. And I'm gonna. We don't know anything. Everyone didn't hear, but that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, the director is the same guy who directed the Marina Abramovich, The Artist is Present documentary, and so I'm freaking out just to be working with him. That's a really cool thing. But I missed having the podcast so that I have a reason to talk to you guys more often. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you, Brian, and you guys, all of you. I feel so privileged to know you and bring you, that you will come into this space and share your ideas. You're so creative and interesting and have such amazing thoughts that I don't come to mind. And so I really appreciate it. Greg, what's going on with you? What do you want to have the last thing about?
I think it's time for dinner. Should wrap it.
I was going to say, Greg, it doesn't look like you're cooking right now. So what's going on?
I actually made homemade ravioli for her daughter, and she got to eat it already, and he's just waiting. So thank you. No, thank you so much. I love, really deep diving into stuff that, I can't do this with a lot of people. So this is really special. Have a good night. Enjoy. And until next time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Nice seeing all of you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Likewise. Thank you.
75,000.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. I thank you, Jillian. Brian, do you take crypto?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
You got to report that for tax purposes, by the way.
I knew you'd have an insight to that. So just Venmo is fine.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Chris.
Good night.
Yeah, I better bounce.